What is this?
This is the young God.
Wait.
Before we begin, let's take a deep breath to center ourselves in this moment. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let's begin. Because men who hate women are like boys who were raised by wolves, forever illiterate, stunted, unsophisticated, shameful, sad, pathetic. They will never know poetry or beauty. They will never know the joy of seeing a woman smile without the extreme shame of thinking she's laughing at them. They will always feel like a joke around truly happy women. Damn. I really went in on misogynist in that one. And I meant it. I meant every single word. That was from the Riz and Romance episode. If you haven't heard it, make time to listen because it is a sensational episode. It is some of my best work, dare I say. Anyway, I said what I said in that clip because misogynists are a menace. These niggas spend every waking moment obsessing, criticizing women, hating on women, projecting on women. They stay pressed about who she's sleeping with, how many men she slept with, how she makes her money, how she spends her money, and whether she's after his money. It's always something with these small, sad men. They are ruining it for the rest of us. One encounter with a misogynist scars a woman so deeply that those of us with good intentions have to work twice as hard to build any sort of connection with her. It's exhausting interacting with women who are so guarded, so jaded, so defensive, so sensitive in their interactions with men. All because of some asshole. Now men like me have to pick up the pieces. Misogynists, why are y'all so mad? Were you born or were you made? How does a man born of a woman become a misogynist? What went wrong? What happened in your life? Who hurt you, bro? I really wanted to know, and so I went looking for answers. In this episode, I'm going to share with you what I found, what I learned, my point of view on misogyny, and maybe give some perspective that will help both genders understand exactly what is going on. Because that's what it's about for me. There's a gender war and y'all are fighting blind. It's important to know what side you're on. It's important to not get caught up in meaningless battles that reduce the enjoyment of your life. The misogyny that is in every culture is not a true part of the human condition. It is life out of balance, and that imbalance is sucking something out of the soul of every man and woman who's confronted with it. In this episode, I will hold a mirror up to us all, men and women. All I ask is that you hear me out. Listen with an open heart and open mind. If you're a man or woman who is working through some dark feelings towards the opposite sex, this episode might do you some good. If I do this right, if I do my job, you may walk away with a better understanding of the dynamics that influence our lives and control our lives, so that we may become the gods and goddesses we are capable of being. Without further ado, my name is Rodney Amorkache, and you are welcome to The Young God, a podcast for gods.
Yep. Stand back, gotta talk. Watch cause.
I must admit that, for the longest time, I cringed whenever women claimed that men hated women, because I'm a man. I know men, and I know women. What possible reason could I or any man have to hate a woman? I mean, I get that the relationship between men and women is complicated, but hate? Disrespect? Sure. Misunderstandings? Of course. Mistreatment? Definitely. But hate? Because hate is a strong word. When women would say men hate them, it sounded like an emotional overreaction to the actions of a few. And most times, it was. But then I got curious. Maybe there's some truth to this. Maybe the misogynist in me was not allowing me to see. Or maybe I was judging things based on my own life experience, my own perspective, expecting that other men had the same affinity for femininity, the same fondness for females as I had. Here's the thing. When you're a truth seeker, you can't help but make sure that what you know and see and believe is what is. Because it's not what you don't know that destroys you. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so that does.
Whoa!
So I stepped out of my bubble and really listened to what women were trying to say. Not what they were saying, what they were trying to say. Two different things. And I realized that misogyny is real and it is a menace. That there are indeed men who harbor hatred, deep-seated hatred for women, in obvious and not so obvious ways. I learned that 3 labels are used to describe men with a negative attitude toward women: male chauvinist, sexist, and misogynist. These words mean very different things. Let's make sure we get our definitions right before we start throwing words around, shall we? Okay. A male chauvinist believes in male dominance and supremacy. He treats female interests as secondary to men's and does not see women as people of equal worth. A sexist is a man who discriminates against women and believes women should not operate outside of gender roles. A misogynist is a man who hates women to the point of advocating for violence against them. At best, he objectifies women. At worst, he wishes women as much suffering as possible. He sees women as less than human. Now, you might say that the hatred of women underpins even sexism and male chauvinism. To that, I would say, at least, sexists and chauvinists see women as human. A misogynist does not. Sexism is saying a woman is a bad driver because she's a woman. It may be a joke or be an actual opinion that he holds, but it doesn't come from a place of hate. Ignorance maybe, but hate, A misogynist would feel like women need to be banned from driving. He would get aggressive at a woman driver for no reason. I hope I'm communicating, because these nuances are tricky. I feel like hating women is a very distinct and extreme position, and based on observable reality, most men are sexist and chauvinist, not misogynist. If misogynists were as mainstream as women would have us believe, I shudder to think what world we'll be living in today. Because in a true misogynist world, women wouldn't enjoy any of the freedoms, protections, and options that you'll have today. Many of the inventions that cater to women's needs would not exist today. Heck, most of them were invented by men. Men like me would be an endangered species because to hate women is to hate the men who love them. So, the way I see it, misogynists are in the minority, but the extremity of their views and actions are loud. And so, they seem to be more than they actually are. And that's how they win. It's to their benefit that women think all men are misogynists. It gives them cover, room to maneuver. Classifying all male behavior under misogyny is lazy and confuses issues. Words have meaning. So, I make this distinction to clear the fog, so that we know who is who, what is what, and so that we can have a proper conversation. In the intro, I asked, how does a man born of a woman become a misogynist? The answers are plenty. Religion, social conditioning, systemic patriarchal privilege, poor upbringing, stupidity, you name it. But the reason I found most fascinating is his relationship with his mother. One of my favorite TV shows, 2.5 Men, addressed matriarchal misogyny most brilliantly. Listen.
Rose, do you think I'm a misogynist?
Oh, wow, yeah. Why? Did somebody say you weren't?
How can I be a misogynist? My whole life is a testament to my love for women.
Oh, it's sweet that you think that. But what you call love is really just an obsession to control and dominate based on mistrust and hostility.
Yeah, so?
You forget I spent the night with you once. You don't make love to a woman. You overpower her. You subjugate her. You ravage her. Anywho, it's obvious you're still trying to resolve long-standing oedipal issues.
You sure?
Yeah, I have a master's in psychology.
Unconscious, unresolved sexual feelings towards my mother? But it's not true. I despise my mother.
Consciously, yes. And that's why you conflate sex and aggression. It's textbook misogyny.
So what are you saying?
You will never be able to have a trusting and truly loving relationship with any woman until you resolve your feelings about your mother.
Broads have been telling me that for years. It's a lot of hooey.
It's okay, Charlie. The world is filled with women who seek out misogynists. Women who need men to mistreat them and provide them with angry, aggressive sex in order to satisfy their own twisted pathology.
That scene was funny as hell, bro. But it's also a sobering reminder of the reality of most men. Several points were made. First of all, Charlie thinks that simply being heterosexual is proof of his love for women. Most men think that. But as Rose explained, what he thinks is love is really an obsession to control and dominate based on mistrust and hostility, masked as love. She also alluded to the fact that misogynists don't make love to women. They're incapable of making love. That tends to happen when you're hateful, right? Rose noted that during sex, misogynists don't stroke, they pound. It's rough sex all day, every day. To a misogynist, women are nothing but containers for semen and an outlet for their frustration.
Good God Almighty.
Where things got interesting was the oedipal complex, the unconscious, unresolved sexual feelings a man has towards his mother. Matriarchal misogyny is a different ballgame, bro. Other forms of misogyny can be unlearned with relative ease, but when your issues start with your mother, or more. Rose made the point that, on the one hand, he consciously despises his mother, but on the other hand, he has unconscious, unresolved sexual feelings towards her. Emotional conflict is a recipe for disaster in a man who already has a sense of entitlement because he's a man. Psychology is deep, from. But what I like the most about that clip is the fact that a woman is the one educating a man. Most women today don't have that kind of patience or care or even the knowledge to educate men in this way. In fact, they would say men should educate each other. But that's just the blind leading the blind. Because no man believes they hate women. And they're not going to believe it from a man. That's why general statements do more harm than good. It makes it easy for a man to get defensive, to deflect, to avoid the issue. But if you break it down, show him the breadcrumbs of his behavior, and connect the dots, it becomes a different conversation. He has no choice but to face his demons. Also, imagine what it must have been like for a 40-year-old man to come to terms with the reality of his misogyny for the first time. To learn that his dysfunctional relationship with women in general started with his mother. That's not an easy mirror to look into. Most people are frightened to take a look at the forces that shape their characters and their reality. My respect for Charlie increased tenfold because he had the balls. And it didn't stop there. After the eye-opening conversation with Rose, Charlie confronted his mother in an attempt to resolve his mommy issues and get closure. Suffice it to say, it did not go well. Listen.
Mom, I learned about relationships from watching you. And you know what toxic little lessons I learned?
Tell me, sweetheart.
I learned that men who get emotionally involved get stepped on. I learned that men who get married get emasculated. I learned that the best way to not get your heart broken is to pretend you don't have one.
You learned all that from me?
Yes.
Darling, I've never been more proud of you than I am at this moment.
I remember watching that scene and feeling sad for Charlie. Imagine opening up to your own mother, only for your vulnerability to be minimized and undermined. Talk about a villain origin story. Imagine a lifetime of that sort of relationship. That's how a mother makes a misogynist. I find it incredibly fascinating that when we look at the back end of Spotify and Apple and our audio channels, the majority of people that listen to this podcast haven't yet hit the follow button or the subscribe button. Wherever you're listening to this, I would like to make a deal with you. If you could do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button, I will work tirelessly from now until forever to make the show better and better and better and better. I can't tell you how much it helps when you hit that subscribe button. The show gets bigger, which means we can expand the production, explore more ideas and topics while continuing to do this thing we love. If you could do me that small favor and hit the follow button wherever you're listening to this, if you could follow the podcast on Instagram at The Young God Pod and Twitter at I Am The Young God, that would mean the world to me. That is the only favor I'll ever ask you. Thank you so much for your time.
The relationship between a mother and her first son is so powerful, and that you have the feeling that your child is so perfect and is the best of the world. But the thing is that you raising boys, you also have to keep in mind that you have to tell them when it's not right and what their behavior is not right. And it's very difficult, I think, for a mother to accept that her child might have done something bad or wrong and stuff. And I know that in some very traditional families where also the boy has a very special place in the family, the mothers, they are also responsible for the fact that their child misbehave, and like they are treated better because they are boys, and then they think that they are better, and they think that they can take whatever they want without asking or without respecting consent. And so the responsibility of the mom is very important on that too.
What you just heard is a clip from an episode from season 5, I believe, where a friend of mine who's also a mother to a 3-year-old boy, she was speaking about her motherhood experience, and she went into great details about how that relationship is. And I share that because it's important to note that a lot of mothers mean well. Not all moms are like Charlie's mom. They love their children, particularly their sons, for a variety of reasons I won't get into right now. But some of these mothers develop unhealthy attachments to their boys. They let them get away with misbehavior. They enable their sons' narcissism to the extreme. The sons themselves then develop a dependency on their mother. This creates that infamous mama's boy who grows up expecting women to treat him with the same attention and adulation his mothers did. They expect to be loved unconditionally, just as their mother did, simply because they're men. But then they quickly learn that few women want to be a second mother to a grown man. This rejection gives birth to resentment against all women, and then it's a slippery slope from there. This is yet another example how mothers inevitably love their sons into hating women.
Yo, run that back.
How mothers inevitably love their sons into hating women. Oh man. There are many, many ways a mother-son relationship can be dysfunctional. So many ways misogyny can take roots from a mother-son dynamic. Some are more obvious than others, so it's important to keep an open mind. It's fascinating, really. But with all that talk about mothers who raise misogynists, it is important to balance out the scales. It is important to recognize the mothers who got it right. To recognize what a man becomes when his mother raises him not for her selfish benefit, but for the benefit of the world. There is one mother-son relationship that comes to mind. The one that birthed the most important, most remarkable man the world has ever known. Mary and Jesus. Oh yes, we're getting biblical now. The Bible doesn't give a lot of intimate detail about the relationship between Mary and Jesus, but with some imagination you can fill in the gaps. The Bible tells us that Mary was a virgin who was to be wedded to Joseph, a mild-mannered carpenter. However, thanks to a literal act of God, Mary gets pregnant. Between Mary and Joseph, there is an understanding of the situation. They knew what it was. The angel had cleared the air. But to the outside world, to those observing the relationship, the gossip was simply that Mary was a whore who stepped out of her marriage and was now pregnant as a result. I can imagine that it mustn't have been easy to exist in a judgmental Jewish society as a woman with a child out of wedlock. And something tells me that Jesus was aware of his mother's woes because 1, he was an extremely perceptive child. He would have put 2 and 2 together. He would have noticed how people looked and talked about him and his mother. And 2, his mother must have raised him with the knowledge of his conception, his origin, who his real father was, very early. Their relationship seems to me like one of complete honesty and understanding. Again, this is me putting 2 and 2 together based on how the story was told. You don't have to take my word for it. Anyway, I think being raised by a misunderstood mother was how Jesus developed empathy and sensitivity for women and their plight. The first evidence of this was when Jesus, as an adult, was confronted by people who were about to stone a woman to death for committing adultery. When the woman's accusers insisted on stoning the woman, Jesus told them in all seriousness, "Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone." It wasn't just a statement. It was about to get real. It was a dare. Bro even started writing on the ground as if to summon thunder from heaven should one of these people try him. This was Jesus at his most serious. Even the accusers sensed that this is not a fight they wanted to have. So they left the woman alone. And to further show his concern and care for this woman, Jesus stayed back to check if she's all right and to assure her that she's safe. And then he tells her to go and sin no more. Wow, there's a lot to unpack from that. The way Jesus handled this situation seemed almost like he knew firsthand what life was like for a woman falsely accused of adultery and how that woman loved and raised him despite her suffering. He knew her sacrifices. He knew how people were quick to judge his mother without knowing the full story, which is why he had zero tolerance for their bullshit. I think his mother told him certain things that made it impossible for him to have nothing but care for the weak in society, most especially women. Jesus did not play about women. Throughout the Bible is evidence of how he viewed and valued them. He sent a very clear message in each and every interaction he had with them. And I believe it all started with his relationship with his mother. So the next time a woke woman criticizes the Bible for its treatment and representation of women, point her to Jesus Christ. Let her know that the most important figure in the Bible, in the religion, was an ally of women. Let me tell you a secret. I was raised Catholic. No, that's not the secret. The secret is that I recommitted to Catholicism in my adulthood after exploring other denominations for one simple reason: their reverence for Mary, the Mother of God. The Catholic Church is the only Christian denomination that honors, reveres, and recognizes Mary's importance in Christian mythology, and they are often criticized for it by other denominations. I think it's only right that the woman who raised the Son of God, the Savior of the world, gets her credit, all things considered. If Jesus had come out wrong, if Jesus was anything less than what he was, we would be doomed as a human race. Say what you want about religion and Christianity, but the fact of the matter is that the reason the world is not a total hellscape is because Mary accepted the burden of being a mother out of wedlock at a time when adultery was the worst thing a woman could do. She raised the man whose life and teachings would bring balance to the world. It cannot be understated how much credit Mary deserves for the relative peace and prosperity and morality we enjoy today. And if the mother of the Son of God cannot get her credit, how much more the average woman? Let's take a moment to pause and breathe. Relieve the tension. Whatever you're doing, close your eyes, take a deep breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. One more time. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let's resume. Shout out to Jesus, for real. He's a real nigga. He's the realest one out here, right? Who would have thought that in an episode about misogynists, Jesus would somehow, feature? But that's one thing about this podcast. You never know what you're going to hear and what connections will be made. So yeah, as much as misogynists are doing the most, making noise, men who love women are still out here, and we are not rare. I call us womanizers.
Yes!
Not in the promiscuous sense. According to me, right? According to the young God, a womanizer is a man who enjoys the company of women, who gets along with them, who has an appreciation for women, womanhood, and all that comes with it, and is sensitive to the things that make women tick. He understands and accepts women and their peculiarities. That's a womanizer. If you want to know more about this idea, there's an episode titled Confessions of a Deep Woke Womanizer, which challenges the narrative of what it means to be a womanizer and how society benefits from more men having this mindset. I am a womanizer, in the best way. I believe it's an essential mindset for men to have in order to better coexist with women across all facets of life, professionally, romantically, maintaining healthy boundaries socially. Fascination over frustration. It changes the game. I realized years ago that it served no purpose to be perpetually at odds with women. The battle of the sexes has gotten old, fam. I'm here for a good time and a long time. So I decided to approach women from a place of curiosity, to relate with them from a place of knowledge as opposed to ignorance. Starting with my sisters, my mother, then my older female friends. Then came the feminist movement. I highly recommend you listen to that. It's one of the most unexpected, unprecedented things you'll ever hear about men and women. It's also a two-parter, part 1 and part 2, by the way. It's some of my best work. In fact, anything that has to do with women, gender, whatever, I bring my AS game. So go listen. There's a link in the show notes of this episode. Also, notice how there's a term to describe men who hate women, but there isn't one for men who love women. And even the ones that come close, like womanizer, for example, has a negative undertone to it. This is yet another example of how we give negative things so much power and energy. It's easy to see what's wrong and hard to see what's right. It's easy to name what's wrong, but difficult to name what's right. It's easier to point out a problem than to see progress. And I think that habit is just as problematic as any other issue we face in the world today. Y'all are professionals at pointing out problems, but never ever a part of the solution. If you're a god, dear listener, one of the things you have to commit to is being more pro-solution than you are anti the problem.
Please say that again.
Be more pro-solution than anti the problem. That shift makes all the difference, man. Solution-oriented people are rare out here. That's why we keep going in circles about basic stuff. We should be over this gender bullshit a long time ago. We should be over it. We should be past it. As an evolved species, we should be onto other things that make the world and life better for each of us. But here we are, still talking about who hates who and who is more superior and whatever else. God damn it. Another thing, optimism. Optimism is such a rare trait these days. I think we would all be better off if we could see the good in the world just as much as we see the bad. Because if you woke up from a coma today and listened to women, you would think that life for women is in the absolute gutter. But it's not. I think that we can acknowledge a problem without exaggerating it, without making that all there is. I'm just saying, being optimistic is part of solving the problem. So the next time you encounter violence, bigotry, intolerance, fear, or just garden variety misogyny, hatred, or ignorance, just look it in the eye and think, the good outnumber you, and we always will. And poof, it ceases to have power over you. Please forgive me for interrupting your vibe right now, but I just had to shout out the legendary Young God community on WhatsApp. That is an exclusive group where committed, consistent listeners of the podcast gather to share their thoughts on the themes discussed. If you would like to connect with me and other members of this community, you can join the group via the link in the description of this episode or via any of the links on my social media at I am the Young God on Twitter and at the Young God Pod on Instagram. Do follow, do subscribe, do leave a review if you're enjoying this episode, share with your friends and fam, And now let's get back to the show. Where was I? I have said a lot so far, and still I remain fascinated by those boys who were hurt by their mothers, who became men, and now they hurt women. You've heard the phrase, hurt people, hurt people. It sounds like a command twice, but you get the idea. And in this case, hurt men hurt women, and hurt women, in turn, hurt men. It's a vicious cycle that we've entered, like a snake eating its own tail. Which brings me to the creature in the cover art of this episode. It is called the Ouroboros. It is an ancient symbol depicting a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail. It is used especially to represent the eternal cycle of destruction and rebirth. It is also used to symbolize an eternal, infinite, vicious cycle, as is the case of misogyny. There's a lot to unpack there, but as for me, I am still fascinated by how a young boy who grows up resenting his mother can turn that hatred on women. Psychology, this human mind is crazy. When you think about it, it's because he can't act out his true feelings on his mother, his caregiver, the highest authority figure in his life, whether out of fear or respect. So he has to take out his anger on unsuspecting women, on women he is not obligated to care for. And you know what? We can overanalyze the problem all we like, but the question still remains. How do we reach hateful men? How do we get them to look in the mirror and begin the journey towards change? For starters, I would say to women, stop starting sentences with, men are afraid of. For example, women would say, men are afraid of their emotions. Men are afraid of intimacy. Men are afraid to be vulnerable. What if I told you that this fear only applies to a subset of men? What if I told you that for the most part, fear is not the reason men aren't all of these things? It's very simple. Pay attention, ladies. You're about to get the tea. Men aren't socialized to be afraid. Men are socialized for value. Some men aren't vulnerable, for example, simply because they've been taught that there's no value in vulnerability. They're just not incentivized to be vulnerable or to be in tune with their emotions. Masculinity is value-driven. A man will be whatever he needs to be if he can see the value. Show a man the value of something and he will adopt it. Where society fails is just telling men to be something. Okay, but if you don't show them why being that thing is in their best interest, they will not take it on. If you show a man the benefits of being a better person, of not hating women, of intimacy, he will adjust. Tomorrow you will see the best man you've ever seen. He will change. Women want so badly for men to be more like them, so they talk to men like they're women. But guess what? You can't guilt or shame a man into something in which he doesn't see the value in the first place. He's just going to stand on business. He's going to die on that hill. In fact, he will double down just to show you Pepe. He will become even more defensive for associating him with fear. So the trick, both on an interpersonal level and on a social level, is to get men to shift their value systems. He needs to unlearn and relearn his value system. Looking at myself, I didn't become the man I am simply because I'm a good person. Oh no. In fact, I learned very early how bad I can be. And so I decided to be good. I saw the value in being a good person. And so I readjusted my life to fit that. It was in my enlightened self-interest to rid myself of any thought patterns about women, about life, about whatever would limit my enjoyment of life and my potential to being the best person I can be. And that's why when I have these conversations, I make it a point to highlight the benefits, the value of having better relationships with women, of unlearning sexism, chauvinism, and misogyny in very clear and basic terms so that men of different levels of understanding and trauma will be carried along. This is how we change the game. This is how we change the narrative and make life better for one another. Now, those of you who are parents, you have your work cut out for you. You're going to make a lot of mistakes raising children. But the best way to compensate, to offset any unintended consequences from your mistakes is to allow your children to address their feelings as they feel them. Create a space, a relationship where your children can express how they feel about what you did and what is happening around them, and have conversations with them that allow them to exorcise their would-be demons early. And most importantly, be ready to take responsibility, to offer a sincere apology if you messed up. Because if not, you will create a monster. Unresolved feelings in childhood become monsters in adulthood. Quote me on that. And as for you, grown man, misogynist, I hate calling you that. It pains me to have to do this, but here we are. I would say go to therapy, but therapy is expensive, and good therapists who can unpack these things are rare, and they're even more expensive. This episode is maybe the best you have at this moment. But maybe you can also be your own therapist by first accepting that women aren't the problem. Something or someone in your past is causing you to continually set yourself up for pain. It is very tempting to avoid facing the fact that you are broken and instead decide that women are sadistic and dangerous and are not worth loving. Some are, for sure. Oh yeah, some women are dangerous and problematic and, men, we know that women are not angels out here, but you can always focus on the ones that do better because they're out there as well. But instead, you keep obsessing over the women that aren't good for you. What does that say about you? It says that it's not really women you hate, but actually, you hate yourself. And that should scare you. On this note, I rest my case. It's been a great episode expressing these feelings and these ideas. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope something made sense. Again, I'm no psychologist or therapist or whatever. These are just thoughts from the mind of a man who is trying to help where others aren't really helping. So you don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research. Do your own work, whether you're a man or a woman. Talk to people in your life, compare notes, and really try and get to the bottom of these things. Because, man, I can tell you this. Everything I always say on this podcast comes down to this. If your goal, if your destiny, if your dream is to be the best version of yourself, you will not reach it entertaining negative attitudes and ideas about yourself or others. There's no way. If you want to succeed, if you want to thrive, if you want to create that dream life you've always wanted for your family, for your friends, whatever is important to you, you need to make sure that internally you're set, you're straight. Let the world be what it is, but inside you, you have to make sure that you are clean and crystal and pure. So that when the good things of life come your way, you're equipped to grasp it, to get it, to make the most of it. That's how you become a god. So, please share with your family and friends. Please leave a review if you feel inspired. Mention the Young God on social media. Wherever you listen, wherever you're active, the Young God is there. And happy Women's Day. Happy Mother's Day. How odd is it that on Women's Day that this episode is dropping? This is what I'm talking about. And Mother's Day is like 3 days away or 2 days away. It's on the Sunday after this drop. So, coincidence? I think not, that I'm addressing these issues at this core moment in time. Every other platform is going to be honoring women and giving women their flowers in all kinds of ways. But I decided to try something else and just be very, very real and hold all of us accountable on how we treat women, how we see women. So, yeah. Happy Women's Day and Happy Mother's Day. This is the Young God.
This got talk. This got talk. Let God talk.
It brings some excitement to the word of God.